Spring's almost here. Pardon me? Yeah, it's almost here. We know that it could very easily snow in May, but it's still looking better, isn't it? The days are getting longer. That's what Lent means, lengthening of days. Go ahead and run that up one, please. It's possible for a wise person to become a fool. Last week we talked about King Solomon. Are we recording, Crystal? Are we all set? Okay. Last week we talked about how Solomon had asked God for wisdom to rule his people, and how that really pleased God. And as a result of Solomon's wisdom, people came from the ends of the earth to hear his wisdom, and he wrote the book of Proverbs. It's largely believed that he wrote the book of Ecclesiastes, which is another wisdom book, the Song of Solomon, and there are a lot of Proverbs. The Bible says there are a lot of Proverbs that are not recorded in the Bible. There are many others. At least one of the Psalms was written by Solomon. But in his old age, he became out of favor with God. And it says, the Lord was angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord and the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. So he didn't really have any excuse, because he had met God face to face on 2 occasions. And he commanded him concerning this matter that he should not follow other gods, but he did not observe what the Lord commanded. I mean, the fear of the Lord is said to be the beginning of wisdom. And Solomon wasn't too wise when it came to family relations. He had hundreds of concubines, and he had several wives. And so his whole thing was a sexual problem. He had all the money that you could possibly want. He had all the women that he could possibly want. And that wasn't too wise, because they don't get along too well together in a family of 900 women in one house. That doesn't work out too well. And so what was the problem? Was it the polygamy? Yes, that was the problem, but there was an underlying problem. And that is that he had political marriages. And that, to us in the West, doesn't sound, we don't really understand that. But if you go to, say, India, like our friend Pastor Philip, who many of you know, they would arrange marriages. And I heard Philip say to me, well, I married my first son to a doctor, and I married my second son to this one, and now we have to find a dentist. And the kids had no say, really, in who they would marry. They were married politically, so that they could all get their teeth cleaned and they could all go to the doctor when they needed to. And so this is what Solomon did. Only what he did is he married the daughters of the kings of the area. And so he thought, well, I'm not going to have any problem with the king of Moab if I marry his daughter. And he's not going to come and bring an army against me because his daughter is in my house. And so he married women from all of these countries around. And when he did that, now this doesn't sound too wise, does it? When he did that, they all wanted their own religion. And in those days, we have the big 3 monotheistic religions. We have Christianity and Judaism and Islam. All 3 they have one God. But if you go to some of the Eastern religions, there's thousands of gods in India, and each area would have its own god. And so the Moabites would have their own god, the Ammonites would have their own god. And to keep peace among these women, he built them churches, so to speak, buildings for these foreign gods to be worshipped in. And that's not a very wise thing to do because there is only one God, and we're told we should revere him only. And so even though he had a magnificent understanding of things, he thought it would be wise to avoid war, to make peace with all these other kings through his marriages, and then to keep those people happy, give them their own religion, and God didn't like it. And so he didn't end up good. Even though he gave us some magnificent scriptures and magnificent lessons to learn about life, when it came to the end of his life, he failed. Now, I don't think he necessarily went to hell, but he certainly made a hell on earth for his people in the end because of these things. So it is possible for a wise person to end up a fool. It's difficult sometimes. You know, look around and I see people that were on fire for the Lord and serving God, and then they come to a place, their kids get grown, and maybe they get retired or something, and then they lose all interest in serving God. Now, that's not everybody. Obviously, you're all here, but there have been a lot of people over the years that, you know, they just stop. I don't know if they're still praying at home. I don't know if they read their scriptures. I kind of doubt they do, many of them. Some of them obviously do. But it's not how you start out, it's how you end up. And I certainly wouldn't want to come to the end of my life and be found to be lacking, even though, you know, I'm not afraid I'm going to go to hell or anything, but I certainly don't want to come to the place where I start worshiping other things other than God. And unfortunately, that's what happened to Solomon. So what happens when a king dies? Somebody else has to be king. And when somebody else has to be king, what happens? A whole lot of people want to be king. And things start to happen, and people start to connive behind the scenes. You know what I'm talking about, right? Doing little dirty tricks here and there. And so it says in the next slide, thus the time that Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel was 40 years, and Solomon slept with his father. That's a euphemism for passed away, which is a euphemism for died. He slept with his fathers. My grandmother always would say, well, after I croak, this is what you're supposed to do. I mean, we have these euphemisms for death. Solomon slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of his father David, and his son Rehoboam reigned in his place. Now, Rehoboam is an ancestor of Jesus, just like Solomon is an ancestor of Jesus, and David is an ancestor of Jesus. And so Rehoboam is a young man and doesn't have a lot of sense. It says, next slide please, Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had come to Shechem to make him king. Now, if you remember, those of you who were here, we talked about the kingdom and, let's see here. Help if I turn it on. This is the land of Judea, and this is where Solomon's father David had become king at first, and then the rest of these tribes, these 10 tribes to the north, were called Israel or Ephraim. And it wasn't until later this isn't working right. It wasn't until later in David's reign that the northern 10 tribes came down and joined with King David in Jerusalem. And he was able to unite the whole country together, all 12 tribes. And it was kind of a tenuous relationship. And you want to talk about a divided kingdom. It certainly was divided. I mean, we talk about a divided country. We have some on this side and some on that side. But in those days, the divided country literally meant the north and the south. And they were different people. They were all related from the king of Israel, but they were in different places. They thought differently. They spoke a different accent and so forth. And David was eventually able to consolidate them all under one crown in Jerusalem. And so after the death of David, Solomon came along, he wrote all this wisdom stuff, and people began, it was a time of prosperity, and gold and all kinds of stuff was coming in, and it was a time of peace for 40 years. And so now Rehoboam needs to go to Shechem because he needs the votes. He needs the leaders of the northern tribe, which was called Israel. The southern tribe was called Judah, which is where we get the word Jew from. His father was from the tribe of Judah. He's from the tribe of Judah. So he needs to go to the north and get the support of the northern tribes and have them recognize his kingdom and his kingship. And so he went up to their area. Instead of saying to them, you have to come to Jerusalem to do it, he goes up to a major city in their area and is meeting with the leaders of the 10 tribes of Israel in the north. Next slide, please. When Jeroboam the son of Nebat heard of it, he was still in Egypt, where he had fled from King Solomon. Here's a political enemy. Here's a troublemaker that Solomon had a problem with. Well, Solomon didn't always have a problem with him, because if you read on, you learn about Jeroboam. And Jeroboam, it says when Solomon saw he was an industrious guy, he put him in charge of all kinds of stuff. But then, I don't want to go way too into this, but eventually Solomon realizes that Jeroboam is a political enemy. And when Solomon realizes that Jeroboam is a political enemy, he exiles him, he comes after him, he splits, he goes to Egypt, and he's waiting for the death of Solomon, and Solomon has died, and Rehoboam, his son, is taking over, and so the loyal opposition or the unloyal opposition from these northern tribes, they call for him out of exile and bring him back because he's the de facto leader of these northern tribes. And so he comes and he tries to make a deal. Now, Jeroboam means the people will contend. I think that's interesting. Contention is not a thing that anybody's too pleasant with. And Rehoboam, his name means the people is enlarged. And so he's thinking, I'm going to be a greater king than my father was. And Jeroboam said, not so quickly. We got to talk about a few things here. You got these two guys down. Jeroboam, he's the bad guy, and Rehoboam, he's the bad guy. Neither one of them are great. Jeroboam is worse than Rehoboam. Here they said, your father made our yoke heavy. Therefore lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke that he placed on us, and we will serve you. And Rehoboam said to them, go away for 3 days, and then come to me again. So the people went away. Now, here we have a photo of a yoke, and a yoke is supposed to make things easier, not harder. I have, over in my office, if you ever want to stop over and see it, I have one of these human yokes that I believe belonged to my great-grandfather Cotter. I got it after my father died with a whole bunch of stuff that came from his grandfather, and so I believe it was part of that, where he had to draw water or whatever. And if you have to draw buckets like this, you've done it. It's not an easy thing to do, but if you can put it on your shoulders, it's a lot easier. And so they say to Rehoboam, your father taxed us too much. Lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke that he placed on us, and we will serve you. Now, there's an irony in this. If you just read this passage, you might not understand, but Jeroboam, when he was working for Solomon, he was in charge of the forced labor. He was the guy that made people work, whether they were enslaved or whether they were, paid them nothing or next to nothing. He was the one that made them work. They were the ones that built the walls. They were the ones that built the temples and all the things that saw, all the grandiose, marvelous, wonderful things that Solomon did that people from all over the world came to see. It was all done by the people who were sweating underneath Jeroboam. And so he was a very important guy in the kingdom until he started having his falling out with Solomon. And so they said, these 10 tribes, they said, all you have to do is make it so it's not so hard on the average guy, on the average gal. Sound familiar? It's always about this. It's eternal. The powers that be, they want the money. And they want to take it from the non-powers that be. And so instead of saying, I probably should do that. They are pretty well oppressed. They were pretty well oppressed by Dad. I could easily, lower the taxes, could lower the percentage or whatever. But instead he says, let me think about it for 3 days. Why does he need to think about it? He needs to consult with others. Next slide. 1 Kings 12. King Rehoboam took counsel with the older men who had attended his father Solomon while he was still alive, saying, how do you advise me to answer this people? And they said, this is the key sentence in the whole thing. If you will be a servant to this people and serve them. Does that sound like something Jesus said? They came to Jesus and said, we want to be on your right hand and on your left. And Jesus said, the Gentiles, that's the way they do it. But not so among you. Whoever serves the most will be the greatest. That's what Jesus taught. And this is what these counselors of this man's father said. You have to have some humility here, and you have to look at your kingdom as your job is to be under God and to serve these people and to make sure they all have what they need. And that you're a help to them and not a hindrance to them. And speak good words, not words of flattery, honest words from a heart that wants to be a person of God. And if you do, they will be your servants forever. Does this sound like good advice? It's the best advice ever given, really, when you think about it. He's at a juncture where there could be severe political consequences if these people don't follow, because if these people don't follow, he's going to lose 10/12, 5/6, if you can do the math, of the people that are going to go after another leader. But then he thinks, well, maybe I should talk to the younger people. One more slide there, please. Proverbs 15. Without consultation, plans are frustrated, but with many counselors they succeed. Now, this is only true if you get the right counselor. Sometimes people say, well, I'm thinking about doing this, and I went and talked to so-and-so, and they said I should go ahead and do it. And so-and-so already did it, and it was disastrous. And so-and-so said, oh, yeah, life is great. Do it. Or God told me this, or God told me that. When somebody tells me God told them something and then it doesn't line up with the Bible, I have a suspicion that maybe God didn't tell them that. Maybe. I'm not sure, because I'm not infallible, but if it's against Scripture. On the other hand, consultation is necessary. But who will you get consultation from? You should get consultation before you enter into a marriage. You should get consultation before you decide to open a business. And you shouldn't ask the people that failed at the business for advice. You should find somebody who has succeeded in the business and get advice. Unless your advice from the failed person is, the failed person could say, well, don't do this because I tried this and this and this and I failed here, and there and there. You know, even if a person in the sound of my voice has failed at something in life, whatever it is, in the past, whatever it is, if they can use that to help somebody not make that mistake, then they have become wise because of their mistake. That's why it's very unwise, and people say this all the time, I can't tell my kids what I did when I was growing up, because if I do, they'll do it. That's backwards. You should tell the kids, hey, I messed up when I was 17 or whatever, and I did this and it was disastrous. Don't make that same mistake. But it takes humility and honesty to cover up what you did. I mean, that's what the scriptures say. Whoever covers their sins will not prosper. We need to let our kids know the mistakes that we made, and we tried to do that in raising our own kids. That's why they know that I, was a drug user. If you know me very well, and if I see you smoking a cigarette, I am going to get after you, because a lot of people in my family died from smoking, and it's not a wise thing to do, and I don't want you to die, so therefore I'm going to tell you that you need to stop doing that. And that's the way it is with any kind of problem that we've had. If we have a good heart and if we're humble, then we can redeem our mistake. A wise person learns from the mistakes of others, but most of us learn from our own mistakes. And as we get older, we have a lot more mistakes, and therefore we may be better people to counsel others or young people as we get older, because we've seen more things. And when somebody says, well, we should do this or that, and we can say, well, we tried that, and this is what happened. This was the result. So our plan should be prepared by consultation and wise guidance. I mean, we need people to lead us to get their advice, people who are knowledgeable in the scriptures and know, most of the Bible is written about bad things that people did. And the reason that it's in the scriptures is not to say that's how we should do things. It's in the scriptures to see how we should not do things. Paul said in the New Testament that those things happened to them as an example that we should not do the same thing. And so if you've messed up somewhere, just be humble and become wise in the days ahead and help other people not fall into the same pitfall. So the advice is, if you'll be a servant to this people and serve them, they will be your servants forever. Okay. I already said that. Why is there generational failure? What do you mean by that, Pastor? What I mean is, why in some families is there alcoholism 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 generations? Why is there imprisonment of 4 generations of people? I mean, for the most part, we learn a lot of stuff from mom and dad, and if we see mom and dad lying and stealing, it's like the gypsies. They would come in. We don't have gypsies anymore, I guess, but I've met them in Europe, and they'll teach the kids to steal. Go in the store and steal stuff because they know that nobody can do anything to the kid. And so that's where we get the word gyp. But they used to be around. I mean, they would ride the railroads and stuff and come in and commit petty crimes. And how did they learn that? They learned that from mom and dad. If they see mom and dad fighting, if they see mom and dad fighting with the neighbors or cheating on their taxes or whatever it might be, kids learn that. They see it. Oh, that worked for dad. That worked for mom. So there has to be a break in the generational failure somewhere. And then at that point, then something new can happen. In my family, the generational failure was sexual sin. I can go back generation after generation after generation after generation. In fact, my grandmother was a product of rape. And if she had been born now, she probably would have been aborted and I wouldn't even be here. But she had this background, and it passed to my father and down to me, and it was a part of her mother and grandmother's life as well, as far back as we can go, this problem. Well, there has to be a break, and Jesus can make a break in the generational sins, but it takes repentance. Why is it a big mistake to cover failures? Because if you cover your failure, you can't help anybody else. And then people will just say, oh, that church is full of hypocrites. And if everybody in the church admits, hey, I screwed up when I was young. I mean, King David said, remember not the sins of my youth. And, we grow up, most of us grow out of those kind of sins. But it's important to be honest before God. How can failures be redeemed to help others? I already talked about that. How did Solomon's foolishness affect Rehoboam and Jeroboam? Obviously, Rehoboam did not receive the wisdom part from his father. And Solomon hired Rehoboam to be the bad guy, to oppress people. Yeah, it made him rich. I mean, on the one side, on the Republican side, he's getting rich and the money is passing around very well. On the Democratic side, people are working for next to nothing and not getting any, fruit from their labor. So even though he was wise in earning money in that way, he was still oppressing people. And so both Rehoboam and Jeroboam understand that even though Dad had a relationship with God, and Dad wrote a bunch of books about wisdom, it didn't come down. Okay, how about this? A young man inherits a house and cash. What advice will he get from his friends? Did you see that new car? Did you see that Chevelle 396? Man, you should buy that. You'll be the coolest guy in town if you can, run that 4-speed up Main Street. Pipes, dual exhaust, making the sound. You should get one of those. Oh, that's a good idea. Why don't you buy a Jeep pickup truck too? I'm telling you a true story here. It's not about me, just so you know that. You should go buy it. Well, I don't have a lot of money to buy a pickup truck, so I think I'll finance it. And so I got all this money in the bank, and the bank will say, yeah, I can give you the loan on the brand new pickup truck. And so he goes out, and so now he has a Super Sport 396 and a brand new Ford pickup truck. And he sells the house, and he spends the money on this girlfriend and that girlfriend and this vacation. And then all of a sudden, he doesn't have the money to make the payment on the pickup truck. So he sells the Chevelle to make the payment on the pickup truck. And eventually they come and they take the pickup truck. And the Chevelle is gone. And he has nothing. Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child, it says in Proverbs. So Rehoboam goes and he talks to his buddies. Next slide. He disregarded the advice of the older men and consulted with the young men. And he said to them, What do you advise that we answer this people who've said, lighten the yoke that your father put on us? And the young men who had grown up with him. Okay, they grew up with him. What was he like when he was growing up? Obviously, he is a headstrong person. He is a know-it-all person. He's an entitled person. He's the king's son. Nobody ever spanked him. And he has gotten whatever he wants in life. I don't know how old he is here. I think we can figure it out. I think the scriptures do say how old he was, but he was a young man. And so he goes to his buddies, who he's probably already, dragged along to the parties, and they've been with him, and it's cool. He's a cool friend to have because he has unlimited money from Dad. He's the best of everything. And the young men say to them, your father made our yoke heavy, you must lighten it. Thus you should say, my little finger is thicker than my father's loins. So they told him, you ready, Crystal? Next slide. Give them the finger. I'm pretty sure that meant something in those days, although we don't have proof of that. My little finger is thicker than my dad's thigh. I am important and I need your money. I need more money. I'm going to tax you more. Now this doesn't seem very wise, does it? The old people, although they weren't perfect, and they advised the father, but the old people said, yeah, the taxes are too high. Make it a little bit easier. And they'll be with you. Because for the ordinary person on the street, it's about how much money you have in your pocket at the end of the day. That's why they take the money out every week. So that you don't really see it. You don't really notice that it's gone. Not for me. They don't take anything out of mine, and at the end of the year, I have to write a check. And I don't know what it's going to be. Last year, it was like $5,000. I had to write a check because it's not taken out. And when you get your check, you don't really see, you see a little bit each time, but it's a lot of money. And so these friends, they gave bad advice. Not only is my little finger thicker than my father's thigh, my father made your yoke heavy, I'll add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips. That doesn't sound good. But I will discipline you with scorpions. We don't have scorpions here, thank God. This is really a pretty good place to live. We very rarely have a tornado. We haven't had hurricanes since 1972, and earthquakes, yeah, we get a little tremor every once in a while, but it's no big deal. And we don't have scorpions. When I was in India, the first time I went to India, they said to me, when you get up in the morning before you put your shoes on, shake the shoe to make sure there's not a scorpion in it. Can you imagine living like that? And they have cobras and all kinds of things there. I'll discipline you with scorpions. Does this sound like wise advice? I'm going to rule you, and you will be my servant. The old people said, if you will serve them, they'll be your people forever. No, I'm going to rule over them. I'm going to sting them with a scorpion's sting. Now here, I'm going to need your help, Crystal. Here is the map. We have down here Judea, or Judah. We have the 10 tribes of Israel up here. On that day, click the map one more time, please, Crystal. The country was divided in half, and it never recovered until 1947, or 48, whenever it was. Because of his arrogance, and because he wouldn't take the advice to be a servant to the people. The kingdom was divided. The northern kingdom eventually became apostate because Jeroboam said, well, you know, these Jews, they're worshiping in Jerusalem. And if I let these people go back to Jerusalem, their religion is going to cause them to be happy with Rehoboam, and they're going to either stay there or they're going to come back and they're going to make problem for me. And so he went and he made 2 golden calves, just like the ones they made centuries before in Egypt. And he put one in the southernmost part of Israel, the northern part, and one in the northern part of Israel. And he said, these are your gods. And the people began to not follow the law of God, but they began to worship these cows. And it says this, all the people who had a mind to serve God from the 10 tribes left and went to Judea. And those that didn't, they stayed in the northern tribe. This is where the Samaritans were, the people that didn't get along with Jesus, get along with God, and didn't get along with the Jews. And it divided the country permanently. All because he took the advice of somebody he shouldn't have taken the advice from. So when you take advice, take it from somebody who loves God, because that is the important thing, because the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Jesus said this, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. I'm gentle and humble. You will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Paul admonishes the church in Colossae, let the word of Christ richly dwell within you with all wisdom, teaching, admonishing one another with psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing with thankfulness in your hearts to God. You know what that's talking about? That's talking about church. It's talking about being with the people of God, being open to correction, being open to the word of God, being open to the worship of God in a community setting. So that's, what can we learn? It's possible to be a wise person in the beginning and not in the end, but it's also, it's possible to be a wise person in the end, even if you were a fool in the beginning. Any comments? Nobody? Come on.
So I have a question. Do you think any of those kids that gave him advice were his half-brothers?
Could have been.
Was there
He had a ton of them.
maybe an alternative motive for them? I don't know.
Possible. I hadn't thought of that. What did he have, 900 concubines or something? So that's a lot. That's probably a lot of half-brothers. Anyone else? Are you reading? Gabe?
Question. How did the older men get their wisdom? Was it from Solomon?
Probably, yes, from Solomon. And from God. That's a very good question. You're doing a good job. Anyone else? Mr. Keith. Oh, over here first, I guess.
I've often wondered if he went and asked his friends because he didn't like what he heard. So it's like, okay, That might be the right thing to do, but that's not what I wanted to hear, so I'm going to go seek out counsel with like-minded people to,
That's a very common thing for people to do. They
Yep.
go to somebody they know, will tell them what they want to hear.
yep. That's where I was going. It's no different now than then.
We've seen that, haven't we? Anyone else? Gene?
So in reading ahead a bit, Rehoboam was 41 when he became king. So when it talks about young people, when he was doing all this stuff, consulting with his friends, he was probably in his late 30s, right? If he was 41 when he became king, that means Solomon passed away when he was 40, 39. Don't know how long between when Solomon
Well,
passed
he had to have
away.
been born right about the time Solomon became king, because he was king for 40 years.
Right. So the whole thing about consulting young people has to be defined. He wasn't consulting teenagers. He was probably consulting with 25 to 35-year-olds. And like Priscilla said, they were his friends. Well, who were the friends of royalty? People that
Sycophants.
benefited from royalty's
Yeah.
pleasures,
Sycophants, those.
right?
Yeah.
So his friends were men, women that had benefited from the taxes that Solomon had gathered in excess and was able to spend on them. Well, they want more. How do they get more? Tax them higher. So that was one thing that came to mind. Number two, when I started thinking about Solomon's wives, and you were talking about he married for political reasons. They were princesses of all these foreign kings that were brought up worshiping false gods. Therefore, that was normal to them. We need to build temples to the gods that my family worships. Well, that was also Rehoboam's heresy. I mean, he was brought up worshiping the god of his mother,
That's true.
right? So
Yes.
it was normal for him to not really follow God's commands because that wasn't his God. So even though he was the son of Solomon, sometimes I got really confused first time I read through this, thinking, well, wait a minute, he grew up a Jew worshiping God. No, he didn't. He grew up half Jew, half Amorite, worshiping a foreign god. So it made more sense to me when I realized that. And then lastly, I do think that most of our personal sin is based in trying to please ourselves instead of God. And what we saw in this story is when you try to please others, which Rehoboam did, that is almost as bad as trying to please yourself. I mean, God teaches us to please him first. God's first, everything else. So when we look at our politicians today, what's their main thing they say to us when they want our vote? I'm going to serve you. No, they're not. They're going to serve themselves.
Some of them do.
But when they tell you that and they're trying to buy your vote through favoritism, I looked at all this and said, wow, it's still going on. All this stuff that we just learned about is still going on.
Human nature has not changed.
Right.
That's what people don't understand about the Bible. These are people that did stuff just like we would do it or just like we would see it. And it's there for us to look at and to think about and maybe not make the same mistake.
And then for Gabe, I learned this when I was about your age. My mom taught me that you've heard us talk about conservatives and liberals and old men and young men and all that, right? So my mom said, Gene, I'm going to tell you this. A young man that is not liberal, that is a conservative, has no heart. An old man that is not conservative has no wisdom. And it doesn't mean that you can't have a little bit of both. So where did the wisdom come from for the old men? They may have started out unwise, and then either through their mistakes or through observation, they learned how to become wise. And they had a good example in King Solomon of how to act wise. So as you grow, watch other people around you. When you see people doing the right thing and succeeding, learn from that. When you see people doing the wrong thing, and they fail, learn from that. If you learn from both of them, you'll become wise.
How old is he? 9. God bless him. I remember when I became 12 and they said, okay, you've got to be up in the service now. And that was it for me. But he's a wise little boy already to be able to ask that question. May God bless you. May he keep you. May he heal you. May he give you the wisdom that you need to live this life and to help other people. God bless.